start to rock.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
We are just about to start. Oh, I see there's a bunch of us people joining. Amazing.
Just about to start. I think we've already started. Okay, good.
All right. Let's,
Are
okay.
we well gated?
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Mondays with Tara and André.
Yeah, welcome again.
And happy belated Canada Day to our
Yeah.
friends in Canada, and happy July 4th to our US friends.
Independence Day.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an exciting chat today. So before we jump into it, if you are new to the group, welcome. So you're here. I feel like this is weird. It's like I have spaghetti straps. So
What are you wearing down there?
I'm gonna move it back a little. That didn't help.
Yeah, you should stand up and give us a twirl.
Ta-da!
There you go.
So we come here live every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern with a topic around polyamory, sex, relationships, that sort of thing.
Sexual identity, anything under the sun, really, that affects you or your relatables, and anything you want to talk about, primarily through our sexual expression, our sexual identities, how we relate to others and how they relate to us, all that good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about how do I introduce my open relationship to others without scaring them away.
Yeah.
But before we jump in, want to give you a couple of announcements. We're super excited. Next week we're going to be live streaming from Thousand Islands Pride. We've been asked by member Kara Dixon to join and do a talk on Polyamory 101 with a Q&A.
Yeah.
So if you join us live, you can actually ask her questions, and I think she's going to be there and asking us live questions.
On location.
On location. So hopefully
wild.
we get the tech all worked out, but it's going to be a good one because we're going to be talking about the different types of relational identities.
Yeah, going back to basics, right? 101 kind of Polyamory 101.
Yeah.
Which, everybody already knows everything about everything. But for those of you who fall into my category where I know nothing about anything, it's a great place to kick off and learn some stuff.
Well, exactly. And I think it's great to also review where you are, because sometimes our identity changes, or we might see something in a different way as time evolves. So it's great to look back and see and kind of revisit that even within your own relationships. So, yeah.
But, that's so interesting, right? That we do evolve over time. So what I might have thought about myself or announced to the world about myself may shift over time, and it may come back to that. It may be different things, but it kind of is the segue to where we're going to go about today, right? How do we let it be known who we are, what we want others to know about us, what we want to know about them? How do we do that kind of exchange, and how do we do it in a comfortable way, as you say, in a way that doesn't scare people away? Because, if you just run into the subway or into and say, "Hey, I'm polyamorous," people be like, "Okay, that's good." And,
Thank you.
Whatever, overshare, maybe not, who knows? But maybe there's other ways of kind of gauging taking the temperature of the room and finding out who we are and how we can express that and who they are and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and the reason we're talking about this is because it came up both on the beach and then also at an event. You had met up with someone that you hadn't seen in a while. So.
Sure. Yeah. And also at another party, I asked them directly, how do you express yourself? How do you let it be known that you guys are doing this? And they had a great answer. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Awesome. So the other thing we want to let you know is that we are starting our group program, Polyamory and Open Relationship Mastery, with Tara and André.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're taking the lead on it, so that's perhaps it. And you have done a lot of that work. So good for you.
That's not 100% true. It's an 8-week program specifically for couples and 2-person partnerships. So whether or not you are new to an open relationship or polyamory, or you've gotten into it and are experiencing some issues where you're stuck or struggling in any way, this basically is for people to get you all the things you need to do to set yourself up for success.
All the things.
So we will drop a link at the end of the broadcast on how to book a call with us, and then you can talk to us about if this is something that might work for you.
Right.
Good morning.
Yeah, we're reading the comments here.
I think if you think you know everything about everything, you probably don't know much at all. That is 100% true.
For sure.
True. Okay, so on to today's topic.
So as we said, the title for today was, how do I introduce my open relationships or my open relating style to others without scaring them away?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'd love to hear, as we're chatting, what you think and how you introduce it to people.
Sure.
Because I think everybody probably has a different
For
approach,
sure.
and
Yeah.
it's always good to hear.
What's gone right and what's gone wrong? What would you have done differently? What would you like to hear? How do you appreciate to be told or to be invited into that kind of dialogue, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's funny. Coming off the heels of Pride, it was just Pride Month, in case you were in a coma and didn't know that.
I was gonna show
Oh, yeah, right?
Not our sign.
No, polyamorous and proud. But it's interesting because people may come out with their sexual identity, their sexual expression as being this way or the other way. And how do we come out with our relating styles, right? How are we going to announce that? And this is like a good time to come on out. The weather is conducive to it. Come out of your cave and announce where you're at, who you are.
And I love that we can have these conversations with friends of ours who are also in open relationships. We all do it a little bit differently. So we're going to chat a bit more about what they said. We were at our favorite local beach, Hanlon Point on Toronto Island, and had a bit of a discussion about that. And what were we going to say? No,
just about Hanlon's, just a side thought, a side note. So they, the city went and did some work on the island, and they expanded the beach, and I think they did a wonderful job. They brought in some, I don't know exactly how they did it, but they put in some breakers, they put in some rocks to stop some of the erosion, and made it just open and friendly, and it's a beautiful place. So if you haven't been there, come check it out. And if you have nothing to wear, don't worry. A lot of it is nude, so you can feel comfortable. One of the places left that you are able to be nude, or one of the growing places, rather.
Awesome. Thanks for that PSA.
Well, it's nice to say when things go well and it's done right. So hats off to the city of Toronto. Thank you for paying attention to that and giving us this recreational area.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about and agreed upon is that when you are meeting people and you don't know what their status is, so say you're out in public on a beach, even if you're in a place like Hanlon's and someone's nude, you can't assume that they are in an open relationship. So it can be a tricky situation because in one hand, you want to be honest and open about what your relationship style is, but you also you want to be mindful of people's being considerate and other people's comfort levels, because it can cause a bit of discomfort. Right.
So that's making the distinction between being on a dating site, for example, and being in person. So people might be using like OkCupid or Bumble or whatever they're using. And I hear there's like a little bit of a difference between men and women, how they announce it, and for maybe different reasons. So some women say that if they put that they are open relating or polyamorous, they often get this idea or are concerned that it might be received as though they are wanting to sleep with everybody, right? That they are in any way open to everybody. And some guys say if they put it, they often get pushback. They're like, when are you going to grow up and get into a real relationship? Or are you only looking for sex and things like that? And it may or may not be the case, but it kind of has that consideration. That's one way, right? So we can kind of edit it and really be able to announce it at our own pace, how we're going to or how we're not going to say it, and when do we announce that we are. But when we're meeting in person, it might be.
You're speaking really fast.
It might be.
Can you slow down?
I get excited by the topic.
Well, I think sometimes the captions go up and people, so I just, friendly reminder.
Fantastic. I can use all the reminders we can, and I need all the friends I can get. So that's good on both fronts.
So what you were saying was it's a different situation when you're on a dating website and you can specifically write out what it is you're looking for or whatever.
But with those two concerns, right? People are somewhat, they're wanting to be transparent. They're wanting to put it out. They reach the audience they want, but there's also some concern that might not be received the way that they're wanting it to be received, right? People might think that you are wanting something other than what you might be wanting. So they might refrain from announcing it that way and then say, well, when do I bring it up? When do I say it? So if I go on a first date, I'd like the person to know by that point that I'm, but what happens very often is people get together for a drink or a coffee and they go to meet and they talk about, this, that, and the other thing. And then the other person, like, when do I introduce it? So, we're talking about both liking classical music or we're both liking, Russian art, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, I do open relating, and it might be kind of, wow, that was like a interesting juxtaposition. Like, how do you segue comfortably into it? You want to be transparent. You want to make sure that you're on the same page, but at the same time, does it kind of border on that TMI? When is the time? Because we want to take the temperature, right? We want to know that it's a good time to announce that. And the same thing, when and how do we do it when we are in person and not having that platform?
Yeah. Well, we did do a whole talk on that
Yep.
about dating and being
Mhm.
open. So we
Yeah.
did talk a bit about that more. I mean, for me, my thing always is just to be more direct and open with it.
Mhm.
And if I sense that somebody wants something different, then I just move on. You know what I mean? It's same if you're looking for a monogamous relationship.
Mhm.
You're still going to get people who are automatically going to think that you're on a dating site and you're wanting to hook up. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, maybe there's a slight differentiation. If you are open, people make that assumption, but yeah, I just move on. So
Okay.
let's jump into today's topic because we're talking more about when you meet people in person.
Mhm.
And I think before we though jump into how to actually do that, I think there's a lot more to consider before you get to that. So, and I think it's the thing that people skip the most. Like they decide that they want to open up a relationship or be polyamorous, and they're like, yeah, let's just jump in and start meeting people.
Right.
So the first thing is always determining what it is you're looking for.
So know your own self first, right?
Yeah.
So that way you can find out what it is you're wanting and not wanting, and then eventually be able to announce it to others.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think if you do know what it is that you want, then it makes it that much easier to announce it and be clear what it is you want.
Mhm.
And that can help also in the online realm. And I think it sounds really simple on the surface, but I think there's lots to consider that sometimes people forget. And this is often where some issues arise.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So some questions to ask yourself.
So needs, is that what it says? What needs do I have that I'd like to be fulfilled? Interesting. Needs or desires, wants, right? Preferences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it that I'm wanting?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And that's something I think you need to look at within yourself first. And then, you know, with your partner, if you have a partner that you're opening up, and that's the time in which you would talk about that together.
Mhm.
So what kind of, and tied to that is what kind of relationship
Yeah.
style do I
Okay.
want?
Sure.
And what does my partner want?
Yeah, and as we've said before, there are many, many different variations of relating, right? Many different ways, different approaches we can have. And also, what's interesting is we might have one style together, but then it might look like something different depending who we're sitting across from, or if we're going at it together or separately. There's a whole bunch of different ways. So, getting that information, knowing what it is you're preferring, is the first step, and then how we communicate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's different styles of relating. So monogamish, open
Mhm.
relationships, polyamorous. And I think what's important too, this is something we're going to talk about next week's live
Yeah.
stream, because we're going to be in front of an audience that may not be as familiar with
Mhm.
open relating, open relationships, that sort of thing. But I think it's important to make note that everybody also has a different definition of what these things are.
Definition, that term, right? Because I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they said to me, "Oh, that's very cool, but I'm not poly, meaning polyamorous. I'm not poly. We do more swinging." And I said, "Well, that's quite interesting, but I think very often we use the word polyamorous. No, let's use that, but we use the word poly or polyamorous to be kind of an umbrella term for open relating, swinging, polyamorous, all of those lifestyle things, right? That it kind of fits in this umbrella term. But yeah, we might have different definitions and different labels for the same thing or different things. What would be a great catchphrase that everybody could come around and say, yeah, that's acceptable. It's not offensive. I can subscribe to that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's such a term. I know people use the term open relating, but I think that's not also very well known. And even the definition, remember we met that young woman during Pride that was like asking us what the difference was between polyamory and polygamy. And so there's a lot of terms are various definitions. Some would say that there are specific definitions for these things, but if someone doesn't know that, then it's up to you to communicate and be clear with yourself and with your partners what it is you're looking for. And I think this is why understanding what it is you need and what you want in your relationships is part of our polyamory and open relationships mastery program.
Yeah,
that's one of I think that's the second part of that after communication.
Yeah, so you gain clarity by it, and that way, again, you're able to communicate more effectively who you are and what it's all about for you.
Yeah. So then after you understand what it is you want, then the other essential step in this before you go out and start approaching others, again, a skipped step, is discussing and establishing agreements with your partners.
Agreements, rules, parameters, anything you might have in that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we should be both on board. If we're doing this together, hopefully we've spoken about this. We have good understanding of what is it that we're both wanting, what is it that you might be wanting that I'm not wanting, or what am I wanting that you might be wanting. We can find out where we're wanting to go at it together and where we might wanting to not go at it together.
Exactly. I think the point is that we want to create a safe and secure environment from which to explore and navigate from. And I think there is a, to us, we always say this: communication. So the only way truly to do this is to communicate before we get into action.
Sure. But as you say that, to have that safe and secure makes me think very much of the idea of it being ethically open and consensual. Right? Because we're going to talk about these things first. And we're going to say, well, how would you feel if this scenario happened? Or would you like to do something like this? And we can say, well, yes, I would, participate in that, I'd consent to that. Or no, that's not quite for me at this time, or perhaps ever. And, it's part of being open about it. It's part of being ethical about consenting. So very, very important.
Exactly. It's often like the critical step that's missed, or instead of setting up agreements, which is what we recommend, is people set up rules with the idea that it'll protect them from the things they fear the most. And the rules are often based on punitive, negative things, rather than setting up agreements based on what you value in your relationship.
But primarily they're put in place to kind of create this idea of security, right? If I have this rule to make me feel secure, and it's not always necessarily the case, right? In fact, it can backfire on occasion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
But the idea really, I think for me, the most impressive part about this is that we talk about it beforehand, before we get into that situation and say, wow, I didn't know I was going to feel this way, or there's miscommunications, or we feel we can't say it at that time. A whole bunch of different things come up. Whereas when we are able to talk about it beforehand, we can have a dialogue about it, find out what feels comfortable, what doesn't, continue talking about what doesn't, or shelf it for the moment, but we will have our eyes open and be able to go into it in a safe and loving, consensual way.
Exactly. And I think you made a really good point in there. And something that we do is we often revisit our agreements and make sure they're still working and talk about them and that sort of thing. I think what's interesting about what happens sometimes when people open up without having some sort of agreements in place is that when things come up and you feel hurt and that sort of thing, sometimes those hurts are harder to recover from. And then you haven't set up a mechanism in which to deal with them. And then the rules tend to get stacked on top of each other. And then it becomes even more difficult to get yourself out of it.
For sure. And those discussions afterwards may be emotionally charged. So now, you have all these things that are playing into it, and the actual subject itself might kind of be lost in that shuffle, right? Whereas when you go at it beforehand, we're talking in the hypotheticals, in the theoreticals, right? So it's easier. We're not as emotionally invested yet in that idea, and we can start to entertain it and find out how it feels. And are there objections in place? And if so, what could we say about those things?
I think sometimes what people do is they're ready, they're excited about the idea of it, and they just jump in, and then they're like, I'm just going to test it. I'm going to feel great about it, And I think people, often people that I see, they talk to me about like, oh, I never expected that I was going to feel this way, because they have this idea in their head of what it's going to be like to them. And this is going to be amazing. And they're going to meet all these interesting people and have awesome experiences. And then they jump in and then realize that their partner, if they've opened up an existing relationship that was previously monogamous, their partner's experiencing joy and excitement and that sort of thing. And sometimes that doesn't feel so great.
Yeah, for sure. And it might not match their fantasy or their expectations, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But that, even if you have done that or you do that, it doesn't mean you can't walk back from it. It doesn't mean that you can't, have open dialogues afterwards and start discussing. We've done that before too, right? There's been times when we've gotten into things and not fully appreciated or anticipated how we might feel. But then the next day or moments after that, we might say, wow, that was kind of, threw me for a little bit. And then we're like, oh yeah, well, let's talk about how did you feel? What were you thinking? And we start like that. And then before we know it, in talking process, we end up processing it. And we feel better about it. We may not have a complete resolve over it, but at least we feel as though we've been seen and heard by the other person, and we've been acknowledged in our feelings, and we can address it from there. It's all about the communication, as you say.
Well, that's the magic of communication, really. You know what I mean? And when you learn how to communicate well, and there's a balance of sharing and listening and active listening, which is something we teach in the program and get people to practice, it's amazing how you can shift things in those moments. Because when you're truly listening to someone and when you're truly able to share what you're feeling without being interrupted or that sort of thing, it's very powerful.
Yeah, it sure is. Huh?
Anyways, I think that's awesome. So
yeah, I just thinking about it right now, listening to that, I think of how I've benefited from being able to communicate openly, and I don't think it's ever worked against me.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, I just speak from how I feel, what my thoughts are, and I'm entitled to those.
Yeah. And I think it goes beyond your relationships. Like what I've learned about communication from us working together and studying it and practicing it is being able to apply that in all areas of my life, and also being able to appreciate people's feelings and really be empathetic and being an empathetic listener and not adding my layer of judgment onto it. Because we often are sitting there waiting and listening and just waiting to respond, and jump in without really understanding or appreciating what someone's saying. And we don't have to necessarily agree with them, but I think when we do listen, I mean, we have such opportunity for greater understanding. And
yes, it's something that we've covered before about the communication styles, but it's so true. When I'm listening, am I listening to get my own rebuttal ready, which means, how could I still be listening to what you're saying? So, and it's interesting because when we get into this one form of communicating where we reiterate back what the person's saying, it really demonstrates to myself how I've been listening accurately. So did I really hear what you were saying? So I'm going to feed it back to you and be like, that's not quite what I was saying. Or okay, you heard me, and now what do you think about it? And then I can formulate a response that is more in tune, more present. So it's good. But it doesn't mean that it need to be done perfectly, right? We don't always communicate as just the way it would be in a bubble. Sometimes we fall off that, and we just take a gentle reminder and bring ourselves back to do the best we can to be present again.
Yeah, I did this with a couple that I'm working with recently, and it was so amazing what transformed in those moments of them practicing this process. They really truly heard and felt heard, and I think they heard the other and felt heard themselves, and it really shifted things for them. So I just think it's awesome. So I see there's questions in the comments, but we'll get back to them. We'll
get back to
I think so.
Yeah. So where were we? We were talking about
number 2 was establishing. So number 1 was knowing what you want. Number 2 is discussing and establishing agreements. And then number 3 is, okay, now we're ready to approach others. I mean, there's other steps in between, but for the interest
the next big milestone, big marker there is now we're going to announce it or invite it.
Yeah, exactly. So there are definitely different ways of approaching things. Like, how do you know if somebody's open? Because you really don't know.
Well, it's interesting. Yesterday I went to the beach, and there were a few towels away from me, but I could see that somebody brought a pineapple and put it next to their blanket. A pineapple at the beach?
Unused pineapple?
Unused pineapple. It was right. It was right side up. It wasn't upside down, but it was still a pineapple.
Okay, so tell the people what you thought about that.
I thought it was a beacon. I thought it was an announcement. So for many people in the lifestyle and open relating and polyamorous and poly and all those things.
Swinging, I would say, the pineapple.
Well, I don't know about that. Perhaps it is. I don't know. Let's hear from the general public. But it was, for me, often used like a black ring, which you wear one, right? You have a black ring on. There are these kind of identifiers, these symbols that other people might have. It's kind of like way back in the Roman times when Christians are walking, and they would be walking with their staff, they would make a little symbol that looked almost like a fish. And the other Christian would identify by putting an eye in that symbol. They would be able to identify each other that way. So they say, they're a friend of Dorothy's, or they're, a friend of Bill's, right?
Okay, you should explain what those are. Okay. I think you went on a bit of a tangent. Why don't you talk about the pineapple first before you go?
Well, that's just it. So the pineapple could be, for some people, a sign that they are open relating, or that they are swingers or polyamorous. Who knows what they are, but that they are in that kind of non-mainstream way.
Non-monogamous in some way.
Non-monogamous, like queer in some circles, you might call it. Strange and different.
I think queer is a different thing, but okay.
Well, yeah, it is. But again, it's open to interpretation and definition, I think, because in some ways, for me, when I speak about being queer, it's not necessarily about my sexuality display. It's about being not of center or right.
Okay.
Is that way?
Okay.
Anyway, so back to the other two references very quickly. A friend of Bill's back in the day was a way of identifying if somebody was an alcoholic or something. They might say, oh, you'd like this guy. He's a friend of Bill's, and Bill Wilson, one of the founders of AA. Or when being gay was less fashionable, people might say, oh, they are a friend of Dorothy's, in reference to the Wizard of Oz. I don't quite still understand that one, but anyway. So being a friend of Polly, or having a pineapple, might be a way of signifying with each other.
Yeah. So the reason we came up with this idea of talking about this today is, first of all, we want to be able to communicate to others, but you do end up in situations where it's not obvious and you don't know, and you want to do this, like we said at the beginning, in a way that's considerate and, doesn't make someone feel uncomfortable. So we were talking with a friend on the beach, and
take your temperature.
Yeah, and you had asked what it is, how they do it. And I thought they had a really interesting approach.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you want to explain it, or shall I?
Are you talking about Shayna?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Shayna. So I'm going to use you as an example. I hope that's okay. You can call me after and tell me if it was or it wasn't. Here we go. So they said that when they are wanting to let it be known, they might have conversation, and eventually they might say, how much? What's that?
I said not to use the name.
No. So anyway, they might say that they're in a very loving relationship, and that their partner gives them really great, and that go on.
Go ahead.
Well, and that their partner is that they feel very loved by their partner, and that they love doing other things with other people. They might even do things like go to Oasis, for example. So for those of you who don't know, Oasis is a local club here that caters to people who are wanting to be interactive with other people. And so that they'll say it in that way. But what I thought was really interesting about their way of announcing their position was they say how much they love being with their other person, with their other partner. And for me, that was very disarming, because it makes it seem as though you needn't worry about my wanting to, insert myself into you or your relationship, insert yourself into you or your relationship as anything threatening, because you and I are still good. It's not as though, we have a toxic relationship and I'm looking for you to cure me, or that I'm looking to break up with this person. And is there an opening that I could kind of, part you from your partner, anything like that? So it seemed like it was very safe in that way, but also because they expressed their fun and love, it makes them seem very attractive, which they certainly are on many levels, right? They are very open and loving people, and that is a very attractive quality. So I thought that was a very interesting approach. So it lets it be out there, but without hey, I'm doing this, why don't you come over and do that as well, right? Because sometimes we might be a little bit overwhelmed by the information as much as we might want to go do it or allow for it.
Yeah, and they offered a cue that would, the person could say, oh yeah, I've heard of Oasis, or I've been there, or something like that. Or if they asked, what is that? And they might say it's a lifestyle swinger sex club where you can go and meet other people, that sort of thing. But I did as well enjoy that they were, sort of pumping up their relationship and saying how great it is and how much fun they have and that sort of thing, which is totally true.
Yeah, totally true. Totally authentic. Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, I love that approach. I'm like, maybe I should use that, because I think I've been more direct. I've offered it more direct way, saying basically I was in an open relationship, I guess it depends on the conversation. I know when I was in Cuba, we were talking about something, I ran into some people on the beach, and I said that I was a relationship coach, and they're like, ooh, and then they started talking about the one person there. And then I asked them a question. I was like, well, are you in an open relationship? And then that was what got it started. And then the one guy said, oh, well, how do you find these awesome people that are in open relationships or polyamorous? And I was like, you know what I mean? They were wow. And then it started the conversation. So that was probably a bit not quite so direct, but I've definitely been more direct in person before.
What about being on the receiving end? What about how people might let you know that they are open relating or polyamorous or otherwise? How do they announce it to you, and how do you receive that? What's it like?
I'm trying to think if I've had that happen to me. I don't think I've had people. Have you?
Well, what about then, if you've not had it done in person, what about on dating sites that you might be on? Do profiles often suggest that they are open relating? Is it displayed or expressed transparently? Is it well known, or is it something that you might find out afterwards? Oh yeah, by the way, I'm also doing this. So what's the approach that way?
I see. It depends on the site, of course. So some sites you can announce it and you can mark it and you can link your partner if you have a partner or partners.
Right.
You can only link one partner.
But yeah, I think so. But that's already a site that is kind of in that mindset, right?
Yeah.
But some of the more vanilla, so to call them vanilla ways, might not be so common to see that display, right?
That's true.
So how might those straight vanilla profiles announce it? Do you recall?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I would just put it in the description of my profile, but I tend to find I prefer when it's more direct in a like so Field or OkCupid where you can identify it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I tend to stick with because I don't want to get into the situation of dating like someone thinking that it just means that I'm, like you said at the beginning, like I'm promiscuous
right.
or, you know, whatever. And it's very clear that I already have, you know, I'm already in an open polyamorous relationship. And so, you know.
Right. So if they're looking to be in a monogamous relationship and looking for a life partner or a wife, you might not necessarily want that at this time. So you might kind of be able to identify who's a better fit and who's not.
Yeah. And time is limited. Let's be honest. So like, I don't like to go on those sites as it is. So if I go on, I want to be a little more targeted, you know? Yeah. What about you?
Well, and the same thing for them, right? I mean, if you're not looking to get hitched as they are, then why waste their time either, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any other ways that you introduce it if you meet people?
Yeah, I hire a private plane and they have a banner that goes across the sky and I say, oh, see that's me.
We carry this sign around.
We carry that sign around. I wear a tiara and a wig to the beach. No. How do I do it? Awkwardly. Sometimes it goes more fluid and I feel kind of like, you know, the vibe is good. And other times I feel like there's a flirtation and it's like a good time to announce it. And then I do. And sometimes I imagine that I'm hearing crickets. That's like, and other times like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, so are we. And, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
do you want to share your experience from Friday?
Which one?
At the concert? The person you saw that you hadn't seen in a long time?
Oh, yes. So I hadn't seen someone in a while. And at one point we had some time together in the sun. And fast forward many years forward, I see them at this event. And you were there.
I was there.
And I told you that I'd run into them and that, you know, there was still some little charge to it kind of. So you said, well, you know, did you let them know that you are open? Because we were together, it might have looked as though we were in a closed relationship, and that's understandable.
Well, and you were also, one of your other friends was there too.
One of my other friends was there too. But I don't know, we might not have been demonstrating the same way, I guess, because we were, anyway, because they were working and you and I were just there dancing and listening to music. Anyway, so you had said, you know, had you told them yet that you're open? And I thought that was a fantastic thing. So later on in the evening, they were getting a drink and we bumped into each other and we were, you know, rekindling again. And they said, you know, yeah, we should get together sometime, you know, for a drink or whatever. And I said, oh yeah, I think that'd be great. And by the way, my I don't know if I messed up. I said, my partner asked if I had let it be known to you yet that I was E&M, that I'm in an open relationship. And they kind of looked, they gave me this look, why are you telling me this? In fact, they said, why are, you know, that's a strange thing to ask. Like, why would you say that? And I just felt like, well, I wanted to be transparent in case you were wanting to know more about me, you should know that about me.
I wonder, now that you're saying it out loud, I wonder if they were thinking that I was trying to announce my position as your primary partner. And maybe that's why they thought it was a weird thing to say. So maybe that was actually it, not the fact that you're open in an open relationship. Now,
as you say that, I'm thinking about another scenario that might have been a possibility. Did they imagine that I was, because I said my partner asked did they imagine that we were inviting them to come with us?
See?
We don't know. But there wasn't enough dialogue because they basically turned on their heels and went the other way. Yeah. They were going back to friends. They said, okay, I'm going to get back to my friends. But it was left kind of hanging. And I felt like, oh, did I announce something that was unsolicited? Were they not wanting it? And yet I was doing that out of a place of wanting to be transparent. So we'll see.
Okay.
What's your experience been?
Yeah, what's your
How would you go?
experience?
Any advice? Always open, always curious. Please let us know.
I do want to get to this question because there was it's a great question. What's the difference between open relating and polyamory?
Yeah, great question.
So sometimes people use the term open relating to be a broader term that encompasses different relating styles that are non-monogamous. So polyamorous, open relationships, swinging, that sort of thing, because they don't, open relationships or polyamory or monogamous don't define the broad spectrum of things. Now, I do see that somebody has put a thing in here to describe polyamorous versus open relationships, and saying that in polyamorous relationships it's not completely about sex, and whereas an open relationship is typically it typically can be. So I think it can be, but I think there's also people that have open relationships. It just depends what you're comfortable in using the term. Like I would say, I mean, I call us polyamorous because we have relationships
on an emotional level,
and physical level. But sometimes I use open relationships as well, because we do have, we are committed partners and that sort of thing. So sometimes I think I use the terms interchangeably. But typically I'd say people who say they're in an open relationship, they don't often have committed, well, I don't even know if I could say that, committed relationships, but that's not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true. And it's funny because sometimes I take exception to being labeled as swingers, because it seems like, well, the term itself seems like it's going back to the 70s and kind of crazy, which just sounds like a fun time. But it seems as though it is primarily limited towards a sexual relationship with not a lot of emotional attachment. And yet we have gone to some swinging events where we have great emotional connection at the same time. So it's hard to say, but I think it also depends on what venue it is, right? So on a daily basis, are people that I love with you and separate of you, and that feels like there's polyamory, many loves. And then there are times in a different venue where it might be more sexual, physical, like going to a club or certain parties, right? So it depends on the context as well.
Yeah, so I think it depends on who you are. I think usually the term swinging, it implies that you're doing something together with a partner and at a set time. It's not something that you live every day. Whereas,
I know people who are in the so-called lifestyle who consider them swingers and do it every day, and they swing together and separately.
Okay, so there you go. So that is a great segue.
So I think the two takeaways for me are, it's not one size fits all. There is no perfect or correct term. And two, we only know about that by talking about it, by communication.
Yeah. So to recap what we talked about today, we want to ask yourself a few important questions. So have you first of all determined what it is that you want
out of your
relationship?
What's your motive? What's your motive? What makes you consider doing this? Are you in a place of love or are you in a place of hurt? I want to know that straight away. Ask myself that. But then, as you say, number one, please. That was like the A to one, the precursor. Okay.
So
there's going to be some talk with our producers after this, I can tell.
I'm just not sure where you were going with that.
It just occurred to me that, I think it's also useful information, even before we start gathering our own data. Yes. I want to know what's prompting me to consider this. Where am I at?
What makes me want to be?
Am I in a good or bad emotional state?
For sure. That is the pre-step. You are correct. We did a whole talk about this. One of our first live that we did, 150 lives ago, a year ago.
When we were young.
Yeah, well, we've been doing this now for about a year and a half. Yeah, weeks and weeks of topics. But we did do one on the 5 things to ask yourself before starting. So that is the pre-step for sure. But the thing that you do want to know is like, what do I want to get out of it? What is it that I want? Have I spoken to my partner about what I want out of our open or polyamorous relationship?
I spoke openly and honestly.
Yes.
And listened.
Do you feel like you're approaching things from as a space that feels safe and secure? And how could you set up those conditions to do that? And then finally, what would it be worth it to you to know that you could explore your open relationship having done all the work to set yourself up for success? I think that's an important question to ask yourself, because I think sometimes people just jump in without going like, how much can I invest some time in, making and setting myself up for success?
Right.
So with that, we are here always to support. If you do want to talk about any of these things, we offer a free 45-minute call. We'll drop the link in the comments. And don't forget to mark next week's special live on your calendars, 11 a.m. Eastern, and join us from Thousand Islands Pride.
I'm going to see if I can count the islands. I want to make sure.
We're going to go to each island.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun. It's also my birthday.
Ooh.
So we'd love to see you join us and say hello. And yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So let us know what you thought about today. And if you have thoughts about how to approach people. And like we said, reach out.
Well, somebody asking, what do I mean by a place of hurt? So for example, very, very quickly, if you and I are a couple and we're going on and, I feel for whatever reason, some form of resentment, some form of neglect, some kind of ill feeling, and I have a place of hurt. Am I thinking that, well, I've tried different things, it's not really working, but if I open up my relationship, then it's going to, reanimate or rekindle or make you satisfied or do whatever, or find the needs I'm not getting. And I would say that's a place of hurt. It's not necessarily coming from a secure place where we're feeling love and wanting to do this together. There's a motive behind it that seems like it should be addressed first, and then we can go into it in a much more comfortable, loving place.
Yeah, it might be a void within yourself, like a security with self, and that sort of thing.
Attachment issues, all kinds of stuff.
Attachment issues, all those things. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, great.
All right. Let us know what you thought. And as I said, reach out if we can support you in any way. And otherwise, have a great Monday and have a great week. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.